A landmark judgment. International Criminal Court in The Hague has jailed Congo's former rebel leader Jean Pierre-Bemba for 18 years for war crimes and sexual violence. He was convicted of failing to stop his fighters from killing and raping people in neighboring Central African Republic in 2002 and 2003. Well, ICC Judge Sylvia Steiner explained the heinous acts carried out by Jean Pierre-Bemba and his forces.
Armed MLC soldiers tagged unarmed victims in their homes, places of sanctuary such as churches, temporary MLC bases, or in isolated locations such as the bush. Many victims had already fled their homes or were seeking refuge at the time of the acts. All underlying acts of pillaging were committed by or otherwise involved at least two and often multiple MLC soldiers. Because the MLC troops did not receive adequate financial compensation, they self-compensated through acts of inter alia pillaging. The acts of pillaging were often accompanied by acts of murder and rape, and always by physical and verbal abuse and threats of death and rape to the victims and their families.
Well, TRT World's Fidelis Umba joins us now to talk about that sentence. 18 years, Fidelis. You think it sets the example needed to be set to actually deter people from committing these crimes from now on?
Well, this is more like a starting point because the prosecutors were calling for a minimum of 25 years, even though the ICC had a maximum number of years of 30, except maybe if they found it to be of much gravity than people had actually, the lawyers had actually argued. But in this case now, this is an example, and others now know that there are consequences for their actions. So it's going to send a very strong message, both to the rebel leaders, both to the fighters themselves, because beyond this, some of the fighters, they also know that if one day I become a commander, that I have to take authority, I have to own, more like exercise authority and control over my fighters. And for serving leaders, because he's the former vice president of Democratic Republic of Congo, they now know that no matter how highly placed, that the ICC is no longer the toothless bulldog that it used to be, that now they are ready to act.
They're clearly saying that these crimes will not be forgotten. But something important to point out about this sentence, we had said that these are crimes that he and his rebel forces carried out. He did not carry them out. They acknowledged that physically he was not even present when these crimes were committed, but he deliberately turned a blind eye to 1,500 or so of his men while they committed these acts.
Yeah, this is actually like the very first time that someone will be jailed for the action of troops under his control. He failed to control his fighters. That's what ICC has established. Even though his lawyers argued that he was not physically present, but the judge, while reading out the verdict, said he was getting daily communication, almost even somehow, more like hourly communication, not like he was not aware of what was being committed. So this is also, a very, very, very significant judgment, because people are going to know that whether you're there physically present or not, provided you gave your consent, that there will be consequences for whatever decision or whatever actions you've taken.
A very important message to send. So does this sentencing, this trial, give the ICC some further credibility now, or real credibility for some who still dismiss it as a European court to prosecute only African leaders? Will this judgment give the ICC credibility in Africa?
Well, this is a most high-profile, conviction that they've carried out. Before now, it was just conviction of two former rebel fighters. So right now, it's debatable, because for the African leaders, they still feel that, look, this is targeted, is targeting us. That is actually not out to really more like ensure justice across board, but targeted at Africans. But for other people, they now know that, look, ICC has actually more than made a very bold statement. And I'm very sure people will start reconsidering whatever decision they had taken in the past.
Okay, Fidelis, we're going to leave it there for now. Thanks so much for joining us, as always, with your insight.